Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first of the three KLC webinars. The series, which will run on
Right.
consecutive Thursdays, is inspired
Hi,
by
hi,
recent
hello everyone.
events. Hello. um, and it's inspired by recent events and considers how the design industry will resurrect and reform, thinking first tonight about commercial considerations. Secondly, next week, about the widening recruitment to increase diversity. And finally, a lighting on an increased emphasis on health and well-being. My name is Bennett. I'm currently president of the British Institute of Interior Design, the BIID, and I've been delighted to be asked to chair the discussion this evening. It'll be around 45 minutes to 1 hour, and we'll have a Q&A session following the discussion. Well, we have a distinguished panel assembled here for this discussion. And I'll start off with Susie Rumbold. Susie is a founder and creative director of Tessuto, a successful multidisciplinary design studio based in London. She's also the past president of the BIID. Tessuto is an award-winning studio working across a variety of industry sectors, both here and abroad. Susie regularly commentates on interior design issues in national and trade media and is also a speaker and a chairperson at many design events nationally. As well as serving on many awards judging panels, she's industry representative for the National Design Academy, currently sitting on their degree validation committee. Susie's still active within the BIID, recently working on the development of a suite of interior design appointment contracts. These are digital contracts in partnership with the RIBA. Next up is Geeta Dhar. Geeta is head of careers at KLC. It's been a widely praised career service, achieving exceptionally high employment statistics for KLC graduates every year. With a background in architecture, she was previously a senior consultant at Capital Property Recruitment, specialising in recruitment for the built environment and for Hayes. Geeta is actively involved in providing careers advice and enthusiastically matching specific graduates to appropriate design practices. In addition, Geeta plays an important role in developing the school's key industry contacts and analysis and reports on employment trends within the design industry. Next up is Simon, who's just finally joined us. Welcome, Simon. Simon's over 30 years experience as a creative within the built environment sector. He's run his own interior design consultancy and also has specialized in design recruitment. He's authored numerous blogs, trend reports and design articles, as well as a book, and is a visiting tutor to several universities and design schools. He's worked and given talks in cities across the world. More recently, he was appointed editor and content curator for the recently formed charity United in Design. He's also on the steering committee for Design Dialogue, a platform to champion better communication and exchange of ideas within the wider design community. Simon has also established a specialist agency, Design Career Consulting, which helps designers at all levels with their portfolios and CVs. Finally, Rob Goulder. Rob is from Thirdway Interiors. He's the managing director, and the company has grown dramatically since he joined in 2014 and now employs 160 staff, which is pretty amazing, which, in addition to design and build, covers real estate, architecture, traditional procurement, and property technology. Rob is passionate about creating user-centric spaces that drive positive change in the workplace. As leaders of hybrid working, Thirdway are currently helping businesses to return to the workplace after lockdown due to the pandemic, ensuring that the workplace is fit for now, fit for tomorrow, and fit for the future. So welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. Time for Change is the working title, and certainly the pandemic has given us plenty to focus our minds. Firstly, I think it's given us time to pause and consider our individual and business needs and concerns as designers, such as how we can improve our systems and design responses, etc. But it's also forced us to face new challenges and to look for new opportunities. And that's really what the theme of our discussion is this evening. So initially, I'd like to look at the challenges that all of you have faced over the last few months and that you have identified perhaps in other areas as well. I'd like to kick off, Rob, with you, because I know that you've been involved quite heavily in office interiors and a new move to this. So if you'd like to let us know what your thoughts are on that, please.
Yeah, thanks, Lester. Yeah, I think there's been multiple challenges for the office sector, in particular in the area that we specialise in. Obviously, during the pandemic, it's a huge challenge for everyone in terms of continuity of business, maintaining connection with staff, trying to work on projects still. For us, we operate, as you mentioned, Lester, a design and build model as well. So we're maintaining our site operations and trying to continue that through, albeit in a safe way as well. So it's a hugely challenging time. When it comes to office users, I think it's been a fascinating test of technology. The connectivity I mentioned previously has really been the key thing, and I think now is a really challenging time in that vein as well, because obviously offices have opened up a bit. People are starting to come back to work. London's getting busier, for example. Most offices are running. We're working with, and ourselves included, at around about 40% occupancy to maintain healthy social distancing. So what really becomes fascinating is when you start getting to this hybrid model of the technology versus people's interaction in rooms. We've adapted all of our meeting rooms here to be socially distant compliant. So we have reduced chairs in the room, removed doors in some locations to maintain airflow and so on. So what becomes really interesting is the human interaction between the humans in the room and the people on the screen, and how you actually maintain a meeting flow. So that's challenging. I guess finally, in terms of actually just getting presence back in the office and how the business operates for us, and I'm sure everyone on this panel and people watching in and listening in, how you collaborate as a design team, how you get that energy in the team, how you continue to come up with the best ideas and really think about why people are coming to the office in the future and what they're there for, and finding the balance of working at home. I think it's a fascinating time ahead for all designers in all sectors, particularly for us in office design.
I mean, how are you managing with 160 staff to sort of balance the workload really in that way?
So we, as you mentioned, our 160 staff spread across multiple business entities, from architecture to interior design to design and build and property development. So what's been fascinating, we put a desk booking system in place very early on, and one of the great things that have come out of the challenges we faced in terms of presenteeism in the office is actually being able to start effecting some change that we've been talking about for a long time in terms of working in a slightly more agile way. We've moved to a slightly more team-based scenario. So where previously we had groupings of design team, commercial teams, and so on and so forth, we're now able to mix it up a bit and have project teams working together and booking desks on a day-to-day basis. And really, as I mentioned, we have around about 40% occupancy. So on any given day, we'll have between 50 and 60 people in the office, and it's working well at the moment. And we found a good balance in that, and really an understanding of how to work from home and what the best elements are of working from home. So it's a challenge, but it's working well.
And Susie, what have you in terms of your office?
So we've only just managed to get back into our office this week for the first time. So everyone that was away on being furloughed is now back. People have been working remotely, and that's been working quite well for us. The technology has been quite illuminating, actually, and I've been impressed by people's productivity through this period. It's been really refreshing. But what we've missed as a group and as a team is the kind of the creative hotspot of all being in the same room, bouncing ideas off each other, and I know the answer to that one, and I know where you can find that, and all that stuff that's just missing when people are beavering away in their own home study environments. And so it's been really refreshing. You can kind of feel the kind of energy in the team has gone up through the course of the last 4 days as people are kind of really excited to be back together. It's great. And but I mean, we were hit. We've had to make a couple of people redundant, unfortunately. We have moved from a much larger office to a much smaller office in the same building. So we've kept our address, but we've just downsized. Lots of people in our building have done the same thing. So this was a building that pre-pandemic had a waiting list of people looking to get in here. And now the 4 biggest offices in the building are actually available to rent. So if anyone wants office space at 27 Akbar Road, it's here waiting for you. But I mean, I can see that there's going to be a flight away from the centre of town. So I was saying to my landlady, I actually think that they might find they do rent these spaces quite happily, perhaps in the autumn, as we move into the autumn, because what will happen is people who have had perhaps office space in Mayfair may be looking to cut their costs, and they maybe want to be somewhere where their staff can walk to work and not have to put themselves at risk on public transport. So I actually think that sort of local offices may have a resurgence as there is a ripple effect that moves out from the centre.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any thoughts about how their offices have been working in the last few months, particularly with remote working? Geeta, how's yours been going?
KLC perspective, yeah, we've been sort of working remotely. Yeah, it's been challenging, but it's been really great to come back. Actually, this was my first week coming back into the school and to see the students as well, so it's been really good. From an employee's perspective and me dealing with employers, and because that's my main role, it has presented some challenges because obviously with a lot of employers working remotely and their staff, I think it has impacted hiring because it's harder to bring in new talent remotely. And I think a lot of people probably have adapted better if you're already an existing network of colleagues who are used to I know my KLC colleagues. I've been here 6 years, so we bounce off each other. So it's easy to adapt from that on-site to online. But I think when it comes to hiring, I think some of the challenges I've faced as somebody dealing with placements for my students, I think a lot of employers were a bit hesitant taking on staff and that kind of stuff. But it's also presented some opportunities as well, which I'm happy to talk about later. But there's 2 sides to it. But it's been interesting to observe all
Simon,
that. Yeah.
Because you're also involved with recruitment and things, or you have been. How are you finding the challenges for officers and staffing in terms of remote working? Simon, can you hear me? Simon? Right.
I can hear you on and off. Yeah, it's a bit intermittent actually. Having some problems here.
Okay. Did you hear any of the question? Right.
I think maybe you have to speak to somebody else, and I'll come back to me if you can hear that.
Okay. Fine. No problem.
From a studio point of view, I couldn't agree.
No, sorry, I didn't.
I think for us, the energy in the studio has been fantastic as well. Being back together, it's a game changer, and it is fantastic to have that feeling of being connected again and seeing the inspiration flying around.
Well, I think that as human beings, we need contact. We just need contact with one another.
I think I'll leave and then come back in.
Okay, Simon, thanks. Okay, so hopefully we'll get Simon joining us again in a minute. And yeah, I think as human beings, we need that contact. We need the physical contact, when with friends and family, the hugs and all the rest of it. But certainly as designers, I think we need that rapport, as Susie was saying, where we're just talking about one thing and somebody will jump in and there will be an exchange of ideas. But I mean, alongside that, we have other issues, I think, in terms of the pipeline of work. How do we keep generating work coming in when we're not able to get out there in the field, as it were? I mean, what sort of obstacles, challenges have any of you faced on that?
I think for us, it's the challenge we're facing is our pipeline. We were pretty busy before lockdown, and actually we've continue to buzz all the way through. We will start to suffer if we don't start to pick up some projects through the course of the autumn to keep us going across Christmas and into next year. I think one of the problems for us is that we've always got our business through networking. You know, I'm very much a people person, and I'm out there networking my socks off all the time, as Lester can attest to. And Rob, I don't know you, but I'm sure you're exactly the same. And it's really difficult if you can't network, because Zoom networking is just not the same. Westminster Business Council they're doing their virtual pub. So you can go on a Friday night and do a virtual network, you know, with your own glass of wine, but it's really not the same as, you know, standing chatting to someone and getting to know them.
Yeah. How have you found it, Rob, from that point of view?
Yeah, it's definitely been a tough market. I think for us, obviously there's an interesting, we work with different sectors in office design, so we work with landlords as well as tenants. So from a tenant point of view, and really from both point of view, it's been hard getting decisions made. So a lot, you know, we were doing a lot of development work with clients, and it would take a long time for a decision to be made as to whether, you know, the button will be pushed on doing the work. I think there's some opportunity presented in there as well. I think particularly in the landlord market, there's some new areas that we've been working in, particularly with, you know, landlords need to get rid of their space. Obviously, Susie, you know, mentioned very aptly about the building that Susie's business worked in, and I think that's a great example of, you know, landlords need to get tenants into their spaces, need to make deals for tenants as exciting, you know, and appealing as possible. So we've been working a lot with landlords at different models of maybe fitting out space. So about 3 years ago, we started a model called Cat A Plus, working with landlords where we actually do an office speculatively in their space for them to help attract tenants that can then come in and just plug and play. And that model has been very, very busy in the last few months in particular, because yeah, buildings can't afford to stay empty. So from a tenant point of view, it's tough. People people may be looking at different models for their business, maybe downsizing, maybe using their space differently. But it's actually moving and spending a lot of money to move is obviously going to be lower down on the priority list. So it's a tough area, but it's, you know, for us we're quite busy still, but yeah, decisions are the tough bit.
Yeah, definitely decisions are being delayed. We were supposed to have been working through the course of this last 6 months on another big hotel project, and you know, the trouble is that there's no money coming in. So, you know, is he going to spend the money? You know, what's going to happen with that? And you know, it may revive in the autumn. I don't know. And you know, we are still talking via email, but there's nothing concrete. So I just think it's very slow. But then there is also, I think, as Rob, you were saying, there's a lot of churn. People are moving, relocating, tweaking, you know, just trying to keep themselves going. And so there's a certain amount of expenditure going on. I mean, we're in the process of doing a big physiotherapy studio, a musculoskeletal clinic, and the client has looked at several spaces. I was amazed at how many suitable spaces there were within, you know, because it's very close to the office here in Fulham, and he's looked at 3 potential spaces, and I you know, he could have knocked me into a corner with. I was so surprised that there were that many spaces available, and I think that's indicative of what's going on at the moment. But as a consequence, the amount of money he will spend on his fit out is significantly reduced over what he would have been spending had he been doing this at another time and place. So while yes, okay, it's a project, it's a smaller project than it would otherwise have been. So, you know, we won't starve, but you know, neither am I going to be retiring to the Bahamas anytime soon.
Yeah, quite. Join the club there. I mean, I think one of the things, and there was something that I'd looked at before, was, you know, the reduction in capex, because obviously if we don't know what the future is going to hold, potential clients, existing clients, landlords are all going to be much more careful about their capex, and I think that this is obviously going to have some sort of impact in the future. Although with offices in particular, I think, as Rob was saying, you know, it's a case of landlords having to make offices more attractive to people, and look at different ways of working in offices, and we'll perhaps come on to that in a moment when we look at the opportunities that are available to us now. One of the other things I wanted to ask Geeta was challenges facing design education and placements of students and this sort of thing. I mean, if you could touch on that, that would be great, Geeta, please.
Yeah, thanks, Lester. Yeah, definitely, it has been challenging. Like, we can't deny that there has been a downturn. But I think in general, when this whole thing started in March, and I mean, we had a lot of support from all the employers at the same time, like really understanding our students, the dilemma they're going to face. But we've also had some bursts of employment come through. So it's not been zero as we were expecting to be completely dead. It's not been a completely dead market. There's been bursts of hiring and stuff like that. But overall, yes, it's definitely been a lot quieter than I would normally expect at a month of September. Everyone's back from summer and you know, but I think we're all aware why that is. And I think there's a lot more compassion right now in the industry. And we understand businesses are in a difficult position; they're not able to hire and all that. So we're sort of working around that. But yes,
so I mean, let's move forward perhaps to more optimistic discussions on how we think things are going to move forward and what opportunities you think they're going to be for designers, in the future. So we touched on offices and so forth just now, but so I mean, if we start again with you, perhaps Rob, where you think this is going to go and where you think people involved in commercial design and office design, where they're going to get their work and where you think that sort of work is going to lead, because obviously it's going to be different from the serried ranks of desks and screens that used to be our norm. Perhaps you could let us know what you think is going to be the future on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the new normal, as I guess many people refer to it as, I think it's going to be a very exciting time for designers, particularly office design. Like in office design sector, I think, as I alluded to earlier, we've talked about a lot of new things in the past, about ideas that have been around in terms of working in an agile way and open plan offices and different formats and modes of working. And I think now in many ways, it's a kind of a once in a career opportunity for real change and for dramatic change in how we approach things, which is very exciting in many ways. So, we've been looking with a lot of clients about how they're going to use their space, and as I mentioned earlier on, the sort of what people will come to the office for. So, I think there's been a lot of learning and evolution about working from home. So, for example, us as a business, we were very relatively light in working from home in the past, and I think now there's certainly a different trust in how people work from home, but also we've all learned, because we've had to do it for so long now, we've all learned the best bits of it, and we know the bits that aren't as great. So I think it will make us much more efficient in the way we work. And then there's lots of exciting, in terms of the actual design opportunities, I think there's lots of things that are going to change. I think, as you rightly mentioned, Lester, the open plan sea of desks is definitely going to be something that will be affected, I'm sure. Sizes of desks, I think, will be affected. There was a big change. Sorry, the light's gone off in the room. There was a big change for in the market, where people were obviously driving as many people into the office as they could and getting smaller desks. And I think that may to improve social distancing just as a standard. I think desks might get a bit bigger again. I think offices may be based in a bit more of a team format. So agile spaces that can be moved around and flexible for different size teams and working much more collaboratively, because you might be coming to the office for idea generation rather than focus working. So I think there's going to be lots of different modes of work in the future.
I mean, do you think the interiors of the offices are going to change as well? Because again, it's been very commercial the way an office, most of the offices that I've been involved in designing, we've always tried to soften them in some way and make them slightly more domestic. But I think, or do you think that that's going to actually change in any way?
I think it will in many ways. I think, as I mentioned, the modes of work, I think, will have a big effect on the way space is used. So open meeting space will be, I think, used a lot more instead of enclosed spaces, probably initially from the feeling of wanting to not be in an enclosed space with multiple people. But I think going forward, the requirement for just for being together will be much greater. I think the way space is carved up in terms of connecting with people who aren't in the room as well. So the use of Zoom and Microsoft Teams and the other platforms that have really come on leaps and bounds, that's a tricky thing. We have a challenge in our office that we've been working hard over the last month or so to improve in terms of the actual the acoustics of how you meet in space when you've got someone on the
and
phone.
lighting, Rob.
Yeah, exactly.
You're back on. right on cue.
There's a voice activation from you there. But yeah, I think that's going to be a really big part in terms of how space is carved up.
Yeah.
I think there's it's just I think it's what has happened with COVID is it's just massively accelerated lots of things that were already happening. So, you know, Lester, you were saying that you when you were doing office design, you were, you know, I think those days of sort of ranks and ranks and ranks of serious desks were on the way out anyway, because most people were looking at activity-based working. You know, biophilic is coming in. People want plants. They want it to feel more homely, and it's that. So, I mean, all that's happened is that COVID has just pushed that on by like 5 years in the space of 5 months. And I think that's one of the things. And so many things have accelerated as a result of COVID. But these were trends. The working from home trend was also something that was coming. It's just that it's, you know, all of a sudden everybody had to do it. So now we all are. But the key thing is that the density will go down. So the bigger desks, you know, the more space, the wide open space, it's density. And that's the point at which it becomes interesting. Is it commercially viable? There's going to have to be, I think, a seismic shift in the way property values perhaps are assessed, because it won't be how many people I can jam into a space anymore, because it just won't be able to be that way. And then the third thing I was going to raise was, of course, it's something that doesn't get talked about very much, but it's actually the employer's responsibility, if they've got people working from home, to make sure that they have a really good working position, that they have a really good chair, you know, that they have a footrest, that they have adequate light, so that their home office space becomes as good as their office space. You know, when we all kind of shut down in March and everyone took their laptops and ran home, a lot of this kind of got overlooked. But 3-4 months down the track, people are suffering with their necks and their backs, and actually that's the responsibility of the employer.
Well, that's an interesting point. And I have to say, one that I hadn't actually thought about.
Well, some of the big corporates are beginning to do home visits, because they're checking to make sure that their executives and their staff are actually sitting correctly and do have adequate working environment.
Yes, because I mean, one of the things, you know, one of the opportunities that we've seen come out of this is in the design of home offices, but that's for people that have the budget for that to happen in the first place. Whereas, you know, a lot of employees, you know, in larger companies, on wages that are not able to employ a designer to come in and design a home office for them. They, you know, may be using a spare bedroom or the second bedroom or a kitchen table or whatever it is. And yeah, it's a whole different ball game, I guess. And it's something
I have heard of companies that are now allocating, say, £500 per staff member to allow them to go off and buy a desk and a chair that fits in with their decor, so that it doesn't look terrible in their house. But you know, that is fit for purpose. But again, it's a capital expenditure that at the moment a lot of people who are kind of suffering for all sorts of reasons, if you suddenly have to double, or you know, heaven forbid, you suddenly have to have, for any company, for example, like any design company, where we're running software programs that take up an inordinate amount of processing time, you cannot do it on a laptop. So you're going to have 2 complete sets of rigs, one for people's home and one for their office. You know, the amount of money that you're going to be spending in terms of additional software licenses and hardware is just huge.
Yeah.
I think mental health as well is a really important thing during this time. I think the working from home during the pandemic, I'm sure we all experienced, you know, the days are very different to when you're working in an office. You know, there's no travel to the office, there's no travel home from the office, and therefore you end up with a working day that is stretched and changes very differently. So, you know, the on-off switch and the ability, you know, coupled with the, you know, the fear and the you know, the uncertainty around the pandemic has been a real challenge, and something we've been working very closely with our teams on at all times. And I totally agree with the sort of the home working environment and making that work for people. And that's something, you know, we're very fortunate. We've got an in-house furniture business as well, so it's helped us be able to create some support for many people, because it's, you know, across the country and the world, I'm sure, have been very challenging times with people working at the end of a corridor on a chair for months on end, and it's
well, and especially when people have such different home environments. So some people have small children, some people have, you know, elderly parents they may be trying to look after. That, you know, there's all sorts of other stresses and strains and distractions that aren't simply not there when you walk out that door and get on a tube and go to the office in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you know, I mean, I know talking to quite a few people over the last few months, that those people that have homes where they have access to a garden, or have a garden, or have that spare room, are enjoying life very much, because that it's a very nice environment for them to be in. But if you're in a one-bed flat or a studio flat on the 12th floor of a high-rise, things are obviously very different for you. And I must admit that the whole employer responsibility thing was something that I hadn't really considered, and I think it's a very valid point and something we need to address for sure. I mean, the other things I wanted to touch on were how the new pipelines of work can occur in both residential and in hospitality. I mean, I see it in hospitality possibly as a more competitive environment if we're having less travel, less people to fill the beds. How you do a bit of hospitality, Susie? How do you feel, or how have you seen this affect the hospitality sector?
Well, again, as a point I think I raised earlier, that I think there's a flight from the centre. So I mean, it was interesting. One of our designers that used to work here left us to go and work for a company that does all the design work for Pret, Starbucks and Itsu. Now Pret, for example, have just closed, I don't know how many of their outlets, but I know they've made 600 people redundant, with the promise of many more redundancies to come. And so, but it's the ones in the suburbs, the not the centre of the city ones that are still doing well, and anything that's right slap in the middle of town. So it's again, I think it will be buoyant as you get away from the centre, and I do think there'll be this wave of activity that moves out as people want to be closer to home, perhaps reassessing the viability of a really long, complicated commute to work. They don't want to do that anymore. They don't want to put themselves at risk. And now I've completely lost my train of thought. And in terms of sort of other hospitality things, I think you're right, Lester, that if people feel that they need to be better in order to compete, then that may be a laudable ambition, but will their capital expenditure actually put them off? So my suspicion is, again, in the short term, at any rate, that people will be doing kind of less expensive makeovers of spaces, freshening things up really, rather than doing proper full design projects, maybe.
Right. I just thought that maybe that would be, an avenue that would open up for us in the future.
I mean, I think there's a lot, from what I understand, it's very buoyant, perhaps in other parts of the world. I do think we've possibly been slightly worse hit than other places. I know bits of America are absolutely booming, and that lots of hotels and places in areas of the States are actively refurbing now while they can, because they're empty, so they can crack on and do a project. But again, is that because that was something that was actually already in the pipeline and they've simply accelerated it, or was that actually new work that was proposed and designed during this period and is now people on site? I don't know, is the answer.
Yeah, I mean, with the staycation, dare I say, that sort of thing, I'm assuming that there's going to be, more of an avenue for hospitality there, in terms of redesign and whatever. But I know that also
you still get fouled on the density, and
right,
you can't open a restaurant, and if it's predicated on having 100 covers in there and you can only fit 40 in, what do you do? It's not viable.
It's not. No, I mean, a local restaurant near to us here, during lockdown, started to do takeaways, and also serving the local community, people who couldn't get out, people who were sheltering. They just did a free delivery service for everyone, and they've really supported the community hugely. And once the restaurant was back in business to a degree, even though they had the distancing and everything, the turnover, was still quite high, because whereas before they might get everybody arriving for an 8 o'clock table, but now they're opening up and getting people from 5 until 9. So even though the density per hour is less, overall they seem to be turning over and keeping very busy, and they've maintained the takeaway, which I thought was great, because even those, if you can't get a table, you can still take away some food, and as it's a local thing, it works very well, and I think it's an excellent service they provide. So that's one thing they can do. One of the other things, talking to one of our colleagues who lives out in Suffolk, she said that she has had 26 inquiries, and I think it was in the last month, last 2 weeks.
I know who you're talking about.
You
Yes,
know, I'm
she's
talking
so
about.
busy,
Yeah,
she doesn't know what to,
I know
where to look. Yeah.
she can't do anything until the new year with anything, and because of everyone relocating to new properties, because people are trying to move away from
Yeah,
urban environments.
this is what I mean about the ripple effect as it
Yeah.
pushes out. And I think actually, yes, it probably for designers, residential designers, and possibly hospitality designers who are not based in cities, they probably are doing rather better.
Yeah, I think that's the case. Yes, certainly. I think, Geeta, if I come back to you, you were saying about some opportunities earlier on. What sort of opportunities do you think there will be for students in the next few months to a year?
I think we're already seeing like an increase in like some sort of like with the remote working, the positive has been that increase in flexible opportunities, and with people. And I mean, earlier there used to be a lot of a huge focus on London market, but now it's not. That focus seems to have shifted, and that's allowed people, from all over UK to be able to work on different projects all over UK and abroad as well. So it's definitely opened up those sort of opportunities. A lot more part-time, a lot more. I mean, well, considering the market, definitely more opportunities than I would see in previous years. So that's definitely been a positive outcome of that there is a little bit more flexibility on people. The other thing I was going to mention about, like, I think I've noticed that people really, and again, it's a little message to students who are, or potential graduates watching this webinar, is to like location. Like, a lot of employers don't want you to travel a lot on public transport. They're actually looking at local talent or people who can sort of, come in to the studios and stuff. So if you're out somewhere else and you're local to that studio, it's a great opportunity there as well. So definitely sort of adding to what Susie was saying, there's a lot more opportunities, not so much central London onwards, and so a lot of smaller businesses seem to be more busier than some of the really, really big corporate companies that I've dealt with. But like short-term contracts as well, like nothing too long-term, but really, really short bursts of hiring rather than something very, very long-term or permanent. So that's the kind of things I'm seeing.
And also,
at the moment.
I guess, from not just a UK perspective, but from a worldwide perspective, we have people who can now dial in wherever they are in the world. And, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's in the UK to pick up a UK job. Would you say that is the likelihood?
I think yes and no. I think it depends. There are some regulations around it, but yeah, there's definitely an opportunity there for, like, for example, for some of our international students. If there is a complete remote work, then we are opening up those opportunities because they don't need the visa and stuff like that. We just have to work around. Every case is different, but there's definitely, I would say, more access to things. Previously, there was the whole demand for being physically present in a certain location to be able to find job in a certain location. That thing seems to be a bit diluted at the moment, and it's just offering more opportunities. In a different sort of way.
And how about educating the students? I mean, you're very involved with that, obviously, with KLC, and if you're not able to get a full class of students, how are you dealing with that? Well, in terms of the educating,
in terms of, sorry, I didn't understand
our design students coming up, if we're unable to have the same number of people in a classroom, how are you dealing with that? Are you more online content or what?
Definitely, we've adapted very well because some of our courses are already running. We have a really nice online platform that we've been doing actually before the pandemic. So actually, KLT, we've been very lucky that way, that we've been able to adapt quite quickly and respond quite quickly. So now for this year, for this September onwards, we've done, for some courses, they're part on-site and part online, depending on because a lot of our students are not London-based, so they're all international. So we have a huge online presence, and all our lectures we have on-site and online resources. So it's been touch wood, really great. Useful.
So yeah. Any of you out there who need some education in design, we know that KLC is the place to go. So, okay, now I think what I'd like to ask you, all of you, just to round off the discussion, is in terms of the future, how do you see things developing in terms of opening up pipelines, opening up communications generally? Do you see any advances in we have Zoom at the moment, and we're on a slightly different system here, but do you see anything happening that's going to improve communication, enable Susie to go out and network a bit more with a glass of wine? I mean, how do you think this is going to happen? How do you think we're going to be able to move forward with this?
I think for us, in terms of the way we see our platform, evolving and improving, I think there'll be more and more new types of furniture and setups for offices that will enable us to maintain. I think there'll always be a requirement, certainly in the near term, to maintain that feeling of being safely distant in offices and making sure you feel safe. And I think there'll be a lot of development, particularly in the furniture sector as well, of products to support that. And I also feel, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the way offices are built and working with tenants closer to help them even just understand their requirement for space, and working with them early with agency partners in terms of looking for their space and how we help them understand what works for them and what sizes they actually really need, alongside our workplace consultancy team. So that's really somewhere I see us engaging a lot more with our tenants.
Right. And how will you do that, though? I mean, have you, in terms of the media, social media, how are you getting yourself out there? That's really where my question, I guess, was. And the same for Susie as well. How do you see yourself moving forward using, various communication methods that we have in terms of media, Zoom, whatever?
Yeah, so we use all of the social media platforms, and we've been working very hard on improving our output, particularly on the Instagrams and Twitters and LinkedIn, and publishing articles. We host a kind of webinar series with our CEO and a professor at a university that focuses on sort of human interaction and business models through these sort of crises. So we've been doing a lot of things where we've been trying to publish information, and we've also been working very hard to improve and increase our output on our vlog platform as well. So we've got a lot of sort of informative videos from all different parts of our business that we're publishing to try and say a bit more about what we do, a bit more about how we're seeing things, and hopefully sharing a bit of insight that we receive.
Okay.
And I don't know whether I'm allowed to give myself a little bit of a plug here, but I co-host the Interior Design Business podcast series, which is a monthly podcast produced by the interior design community for the interior design community, which if you don't know, do log on and have a listen. But we have continued to do the podcast all the way through the pandemic, and we did a series of emergency COVID episodes, which were quite fun. But we have also started doing webinars. So we've started doing what we call our deep dives, and we see this very much as almost replacing the 10-page spread in a glossy magazine. So I will spend 45 minutes interviewing a designer about a particular project. And actually, we've got one coming up in a minute with Sally Story talking about lighting design in a listed building. And the idea is that when you look through a glossy magazine, you flick through, and of course, the one thing you want to know is never mentioned in the text. You never get that. But because this is a webinar format, you have an opportunity to actually ask the question of the designer. So it's you still get all the lovely photographs that you would get in a magazine, but you actually get the designer talking about how she did it, he or she did it, and what they did and what the challenges were. So we've been doing a lot of that. What else have we been doing? Yeah, that's probably the main things for us. I'm quite bored. I have to say, I'm quite bored of Zoom. The other thing, Zoom is exhausting. Zoom is really tiring. There have been quite a lot of studies done about the impact that it has on you, because you're not getting people's non-verbal communication. You're only seeing their face, and sometimes it's you've got many people that you're looking at.
No body language.
No body language, exactly, and that's really tough, and it's very, very, very tiring. So I think employers, again, going back to that, also need to be aware that if they've got their staff online doing Zoom for 8 hours a day, they're going to be like limp rags by the end of an 8-hour workday if that's all they've done all day.
I mean that's what I was thinking. Like with you, Zoom, all the things we've discussed, everyone's been developing over the last few months, but like you, getting a little bit bored of it. I want the holograms, and I want all sorts of interesting things to happen, so that we can have a bit more of energy going on. I'm hoping that those techie people will come up with some more advanced ways of letting us communicate with one another. Now, I've got quite a few audience questions, so let's have a look. So any recommendations for those who have lost their jobs and don't have vast experience? What to do so as not to lose those skills and to gain further experience? So there's a question. I don't know if you'd like to open up.
My advice would be don't lose skills, practice, and don't just do it as a theoretical exercise. If you were just starting to learn a CAD program, for example, redesign your own house, redesign your own flat, make up get some measurements and actually work on something. And if you can, upskill. There's so much stuff. There's so many webinars and there's so much stuff available online to help you upskill. So work on your SketchUp, maybe learn a new program, perfect your InDesign skills, whatever it happens to be, so that you become more valuable to employers going forward. And then the other thing I think is the thing we keep coming back to, which is stay local. Now might be the moment to actually kind of pick out all the employers within a bike ride of your house and just phone them up or go knock on their doors or be a bit cheeky, I think would be my advice.
Yeah.
I also think so. Sorry, Lester. I also think the obviously many employers are obviously struggling to employ full time at the moment, but I think there's many businesses out there who may be going through peaks and troughs of being busy and actually require some freelance support and people who have got those skill sets that they can reach out to and get sort of really instant support on a flexible basis. And I think it's definitely a good thing to reach out to businesses across all sectors and make the skill sets clear that you have so that you can support in that way as well. Yeah.
Well, that's it.
I would definitely sorry, I was going to say I would definitely recommend reaching out. One of the things I really say is you don't ask, you don't get. So, and a couple of no's, don't give up, and you have to try because you just don't know when your CV lands or your email lands, and they've just had a project come in. So you have to keep trying and keep tapping into your local studios. And as Susie mentioned as well, location has become quite key as one of the criteria because they don't want you to travel, use too much public transport for safety reasons. So look into that 5-mile radius and studios that you previously haven't considered because some of the smaller practices are actually doing more work. Sort of maybe they're not shouting about it, but there is some busyness going on there too. So definitely,
I just add one thing to that,
definitely.
and that is diversity. In terms of your offer, just do whatever you can. I mean, during a really bad recession, 89, 90, 91, we were struggling big time. We had 2 big clients go to the wall, and I just put every time I had an opportunity, someone would ask me, can you do something? Yeah, I can do that. I can do this. I ended up working for Mobile doing industrial design. I ended up doing corporate ID, whatever. If it could be designed, we just went, yeah. And that helps you to develop a whole range of things that you never thought were going to be within your vocabulary for a start. But I think it also just opens up all the avenues for work in the future. The second question was what new skills should be developed. Well, I think Susie answered that. Just learn as much you can do at home, with SketchUp, and as you said,
but
also,
all of those things. Can I add one more thing too? Find out about other new stuff that's happening. Become familiar with BIM, for example. Have a look at some of the other things that are going on in the industry. If you know that the buzzwords at the moment are things like biophilia, go find out about that. Find out who's doing it. Find out what it entails, so that when you do find yourself in that precious interview situation, you are able to bring some of this information to bear, and people will go, oh my goodness, he or she's really well informed. I want to know more.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, the other thing I would add is social media. So if you're comfortable with social media, because we saw a lot of rise in online marketing roles within design. So a lot of designers were using the time to revamp their website and starting a blog and all that, but they haven't personally themselves used social media. So they were hiring for people with social media skills. So if you're a blogger who likes to write, or a content creator, copywriter, but has that passion for interiors, those are some avenues that we're getting, because that is remote work. So you can actually do some remote work. And what we then see is that becomes that foot in the door for when the design work starts to kick in, they're looking at you rather than looking externally because you've been working on their website, you've been working on the content for them. So obviously, if you're afraid of social media, definitely delve in, learn about it, because those are sort of skills that we're seeing as well. And another thing I noticed is companies have started like an online presence themselves, so they're like an e-shop or for their own design services. Again, that sort of that needs people working behind the website. So there is that opportunity there to be a bit more social media savvy, if that makes sense, and creating more content.
Honing, in terms of honing skills, presentation skills as well. So the way we present is changing all the time now. The techniques of presenting over Zoom rather than face to face, and often, as I mentioned earlier, often a merge of those, a hybrid of those two as well. So we've been doing a lot of work, in particular internally, in terms of training and helping people learn new skills and new tools in terms of how to present online, and how formats of presentations and flows and the story, and how you get that story across from a design.
Formats are incredibly important, because most people will be watching what you're doing on a small screen. At most, they'll be doing it on a laptop, and they might be doing it on an iPad. So you need to be aware that you don't put more than one photo up at a time, because people just can't see the detail. And looking at drawings with clients over Zoom, I have to say, is a nightmare. It's just dreadful.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things I noticed one design practice did, they created a video. This is how we work in this environment that we're all in now. So we start by doing this X, Y, Z, and where some things are online and other things are sent by courier or whatever, and obviously if you're working overseas, you have to do that sort of thing anyway, but it's where the experience of people who have worked overseas can be brought into line for the UK now. So the same sort of methods are there. So it's working out a clear methodology, I think, of how you're going to tackle your methods of working, and letting the clients know that, so that your point a minute ago, Susie, don't just send a plan by email, make sure that they maybe get hard copy and so forth at the right scale, and all of these things, so that you can then talk to them on Zoom and they have a copy and you have a copy, and it's almost like across the table sort of conversation. But I like the idea of the video. This is how we do it, and it just took you through stage by stage, and you found yourself getting very engaged with the designers, and I thought it was a good idea, very good idea to put that over to a client. Now I've got one more question, I think, before we need to wrap. What CAD packages should we focus on? What do you use? So that's just an open question to the team. CAD packages.
Well, we're Vectorworks. Rob, you're probably at AutoCAD, I'd have thought.
Yeah, we're a bit of a combination of AutoCAD and Revit. So we've been exploring the Revit models and Revit modeling BIM systems across our group, really. So from our design and build point of view, we're mostly CAD. From our architectural point of view, we're sort of 50-50 probably with AutoCAD and Revit. Yeah,
I think. Sorry, Geeta.
Yeah, I think. Sorry. I was going to say, from our perspective, the main softwares we get asked is AutoCAD and Vectorworks for CAD, SketchUp and Revit as well for the CAD and modeling, and from presentation, Photoshop, InDesign, and STMac or STPC. All that sort of software experience I get asked a lot from employers, so sort of an overall. So those are the key skills.
Yeah, I think that Revit, of course, is very aligned to BIM anyway, and we use Revit in my old practice, and both the architectural side, but we also adopted it for the interior side, and I just found it amazing. I couldn't do it myself, but the people that were operating it and what we could achieve through Revit was fantastic. And I think if you have the opportunity to explore that, that's great. But of course, you've got a cost issue here if you're just at home on your own, because Revit is I think a fairly expensive package to license. But yeah, I'd at least look at it online, see what's involved, and see whether or not you can get those experiences somewhere, or just get an understanding of what is happening, because I think that's going to be the 3D type package is really something that is going to be needed in the future anyway, particularly with 3D printing, which is still something that is a wonderful thing that again helps us in this situation where we're able to do a 3D print of whatever it is, it may be a product or something, and be able to courier that to a client so the client can see that for himself. And I think that's a good thing to have.
I think
I was going to say we do teach at KLC, we're teaching Revit and our BA courses. So we've done that shift. So we're actually teaching, all three softwares. We want our students to be ready for every kind of market. So but yeah, we do see a lot of Revit demand in the bigger practices and the multidisciplinary practices. So I think, and it's been incredible because a lot of our students who've moved from AutoCAD to Revit can also see the difference. And so yeah, I do think Revit is the software of the future, but still at the moment, AutoCAD and Vectorworks, ArchiCAD, they're all still very much there, very much present. So unfortunately, it's a lot of hard work for all our students. I would say learn everything as much as you can, because then you're ready for every kind of market out there.
Tool as well, if you want to develop. Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure Susie uses it probably more than we do in terms of the level of detail you need to go to.
But everything. And actually, we've been working on a very complex scheme of the development with sort of subterranean levels, and the poor clients who've been working with the architects, we built a model of the entire thing to show these subtle changes in levels as you went down the various spaces. And they had no idea, the clients, until they saw it on the model. They just didn't have a clue. And the architects had done that for them. So, we're feeling rather pleased with ourselves, actually. Yeah, and that was just done on SketchUp. It's brilliant.
Yeah. And don't forget, pencil, paper, brain. A very fast communication method. And I love drawing and would certainly promote hand drawing. Practice that when you're at home.
Zoom, though, Lester.
I'm sorry?
Hard to do that over Zoom.
No, if you're practicing at home, I think one of the earlier questions, what do I do to hone my skills? And I would say certainly practice hand drawing, because clients, well, in my opinion anyway, in my experience, they just love it. And you're just there in a meeting, you're sitting opposite a client, and this is what I'm talking about. You just scratch it, it's there, the client can see it. It's a very fast way of also getting your own design ideas down on, before you start working on a computer. In my opinion, I still think it's a wonderful thing, and I think we shouldn't lose the ability to draw, definitely. But there we are. Well, look, thank you all very, very much. I think time is now beaten us. We're just about there. So I really appreciate all your help and experience and insights into all of this. So thank you, Susie. Thank you, Geeta, and thank you, Bob. So with that, I think we sign off, and that's great. Thank you, Julia, for